what's a common argument that you have heard against modern disciples of Jesus keeping the Torah, keeping the instructions?
The main, honestly, the main arguments that I've heard against, I guess, when you say modern disciples, I guess followers and believers in Christ and the gospel, against them keeping the Torah, I think the main point of contention has to do with dietary law. I don't know why, but that just seems to be where they go to in the scriptures. They always point to dietary law. They talk about, which, contextually speaking, I would never use any of these arguments because I don't believe that they are valid. I don't think that the people who make these arguments practice proper hermeneutics by any means. But when Jesus's disciples didn't wash their hands before they ate bread, they'll point to that and they'll say, well, look, Jesus Christ, he declared all things clean, and I just so your listeners know, I am King James only. I know that gives a negative connotation. People might dismiss everything I have to say from here on out, but I think the King James has it right in that passage, because it doesn't say that Jesus Christ declared all things clean. It doesn't say that, right?
You know what? It doesn't even say it in the Greek, which is where the King James is translated.
That's right.
So you're right. And that's something that's been added by other translations, which also promotes this dispensational idea.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The other one would be the vision that Peter had on the rooftop, where he saw that the sheet come down and had all the unclean animals, and God told him, rise, kill and eat. And then what they ignore is the fact that he said that, no, not so, I won't do it. He said, he told God no. Yeah. I mean, you have to be pretty bold to tell God no, unless you are passionate about what you believe,
Yeah, because Peter, like most people who take that out of context, was initially misunderstanding the vision he was seeing, which is why it has to be explained to him at the end of that that passage, saying that what men who've been declared clean by God, let no man call unclean, not foods. The foods was just representative of men from different nations, different people,
right? Gentiles being saved.
Yeah, it was never actually about the food. And so
right.
if people would only take the learning curve that Peter took in that moment, they would come to realize it wasn't about food at all.
Yeah, and unfortunately, those are arguments that people make. I just don't think that I think they see things that aren't there. They practice what they forbid and condemn, which is eisegesis rather than exegesis. But I do think even for somebody who's looked into this and studied the arguments on both sides, I still think that one of the biggest hurdles for me personally, even in understanding this, is Romans chapter 14. Romans chapter 14, when I was teaching through it verse by verse in church, it kind of spoke to me in a way that I was like, well, how do I rectify this with the idea that we're not supposed to eat anything unclean?
What if just food for thought? And we don't have to dig into Romans 14. It might take us on a tangent, but
yeah, I think it would.
What if we just took Paul's writings by themselves? And we just tried to say, what do we think Romans 14 is saying? And what does Paul say throughout the rest of his entire epistle letter collection? Because I've spent a lot of time here on Torah Apologetics and other episodes showing folks all the different places where Paul taught Torah, kept Torah, defended his keeping of Torah, was literally arrested while keeping Torah, and was being persecuted for keeping Torah by Judaism, because Judaism doesn't follow Torah, as Yeshua tells us in Mark 7 and Matthew 23. So this is where I would say, obviously this is kingdom in context, right? So we try to keep everything in context of what's happening. And sometimes if the immediate passage or chapter doesn't help us with the context, we can look at the person that's writing the letter and we say, well, what did they teach as a whole? And that to me is a great approach to stuff like Romans 14, where he has some tricky language, and also things in Galatians, both chapters 2, 3, and 5, which is exactly, in my opinion, it's exactly why Peter tries to warn us about Paul's letters in 2 Peter 3, 15 through 17, because Paul was such an expert in the actual Torah, the law of God. He was trained in it, right? That was like, he went to, a degree of seminary most of us never get in our life, right? So he was trained as an expert in it. And so he's talking in like a PhD level, throwing out analogies and references about the law as he's explaining to new converts these ideas, assuming that they're picking up what he's laying down because he's already been teaching them the law at these churches through his journeys. So this is where Peter is right. I agree with Peter in his assessment that some things that Paul's right that are hard to understand. And it requires us knowing the Old Testament as a huge frame of reference as a backdrop for us to truly think, okay, well, wait a minute. If I think he's teaching against the law of God or that we don't have to keep it anymore, then why does he say in Romans 7:12 that the law is holy and spiritual and good, and that in Romans 14 that it's perfect? So why does he say those things? Why does he say in Romans 3:31 that faith does not nullify the law, but no, we uphold the law, right? Why does he say in Romans 8:5-8 that if we're set on the Spirit, we're actually going to subject ourselves to the law of God? What's the overall context of what Paul actually was doing and saying? And that's where I love books like Philippians, Colossians, Ephesians, because you just look at some of and even Corinthians, you look at some of the instructions that he gives to his converts, and it's just nothing but Torah layered everywhere inside of it. But like you said earlier, brother, that requires us to know the Torah, to pick up those, to see when he's teaching it. You know what I'm saying? So if we don't know it, we're going to glaze right over and think that he's putting out some new instruction and some new doctrine. So this is, we can always get together another time and look at Romans 14 if you want and have a fun little, study time on that. That'd be cool. Might be good for the viewers in the future, but I have a few more questions.
Yeah, let's do it.